So I have a pretty powerful process I've developed over the course that it's a lot of success. I take them on a journey of an energetic purification, helping them to connect with the source within their heart. The first phase is a spiritual cleansing, very deep, very powerful. And then the second one is a deep cleansing of the subconscious mind. And when you clear out those core and forgiveness, let's not forget that. That's the fourth, that's the big one. Because at that point, you vibrationally transcend, you stop dragging it with you, and then you start to vibrate at a different frequency, and you actually will see new relationships coming. And so that's the core four for me, and then from there people advance relatively quickly.
Welcome to Soul Sisters Get Real, the show that goes deep in who we really are and why we are really here.
We're your hosts, Karen from the States
and Eleni from Australia.
We've had heartfelt conversations as soul sisters for years, and we're ready to share our truths, stories, and life lessons with you.
And to inspire you to connect to your truest essence, which resides deep within your soul. There'll be tears, there'll be laughter, and there'll be no holding back.
So sit back, relax, and let's get real about the things that truly matter.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We have a very special guest that I have been waiting to interview for a really long time. We're going to talk about spiritual growth. But first, I want to say welcome and thank you for being here with us today, Chantelle.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Yes, we are going to talk about spiritual growth, spiritual awakening. Let me tell you a little bit about Chantelle, and then I am going to just start asking the questions about the first stage of spiritual awakening and what that means and what that feels like. So Chantell Renee is a certified hypnotherapist, level 2 QHHT practitioner, transformational life coach, sound healer, and best-selling author of Aligning with the Divine. She's a catalyst of spiritual awakening and deep personal healing, bringing a unique blend of healing techniques together that work on all levels of your being. Emerging as a leading expert in spiritual hypnotherapy, soul healing, and deep emotional healing, helping people experience the higher dimensions of themselves. Chantelle lives in Springfield, Illinois, and around the world, she works with clients through phone and Zoom sessions. In addition to working with individuals, she conducts workshops, seminars, and group healing. And Chantelle and I met at a conference years ago. I'm pretty sure it was before my son Josh had passed away. And then I was not into the spiritual world. I was into the business world. And I remember then meeting you again at Heartland Hypnosis Conference. And that was after Josh had passed away, and feeling just an affinity with you, like a connection to you. It was also very interesting. So before we get started, I have a ton of questions for you, Chantelle. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you work with your clients on. What do they come to you for?
A lot of my clients end up coming to me after they've been to a doctor for 5 to 10 years, and the medication's not working, the anxiety's still there. um, a lot of people come to me when they're going through a spiritual awakening. And so I work with a wide variety of people and topics. I kind of look at everybody as a multidimensional being, spiritually, emotionally, electrically, mentally, of course. And so it allows me to kind of work with a lot of different issues. When you look at a person like that as a spiritual being, those complex issues can be a little easier to focus in on.
So tell me a little bit. We as before we got started, we talked a little bit about what you do with clients and how you help them. Now, I know there's a lot of things, and I brought up a little bit of it, but I'd love to know a little bit more about your personal journey with your spiritual awakening, when that was, and how that happened.
Yeah, so I've always been a seeker, kind of an odd child who just really was always seeking questions of talking to God every day. I wasn't raised in religion or spirituality, and I moved over 35 times as a child. So I see it now as a little blessing because it allowed me to be a seeker of my own connection and, create my own belief systems. And so as a child seeker, there was one specific memory where I realized that I did not think like everybody else was when I went to a church with a little friend of mine, like maybe I was about 8. And I went into the church and it was in the deep South, a Southern Baptist church. And the preacher was preaching like really fear-based, screaming. It was just very evangelistic. And it kind of was just the opposite of the God that the energy that I felt away from organized religion. And I just continued the journey of seeking and opening up to higher guidance. Jesus has always been a huge child seeker. I leaned on his energy quite a bit. I feel I had a direct connection to seek him simply because I was born on Easter and I was born on April 6th. And to come to realize that was the church. The church actually believes that's his original birthday. So I just have a connection, and that's what led me down the path of Christ or Jesus. And then just over the course of my life, I just kind of kept my spirituality kind of to myself because, being intuitive and empathic, I just was very able to attune that I thought differently and felt differently about things, and I wasn't combative. I just kept it to myself ultimately. And I've just been through a lot of spiritual initiations, activations, near-death experiences that have just it's just been a natural unfolding for me since I was young.
So what,
I won't keep you tied up to all those stories because there's plenty, but yeah, it's
yes,
kind of like that.
that's so interesting to me because many people that I encounter that have had a spiritual awakening, there's like a big event that happens in their life that just opens their eyes, similar
Yeah.
to,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, there was definitely one. I moved out when I was 16. My mother was an addict. We ended up having a great relationship, long story short, but I moved out very young and I just knew that I was going to be okay. I had no money, $0, 0 cents. And I'm like, I just couldn't live in that environment where I was at. And so I ventured off on my own and I was living on my own in Texas. And then I had met my husband. We've been married almost 25 years now, but we moved to Texas or to, excuse me, Arizona. And I was living, kind of independently. I didn't have a lot of money. And I was at the mall and I ended up shoplifting from Macy's, like a little bottle of perfume because I didn't have like money for luxury things. And in my intuition's like, don't do it, you're going to get caught. But I did it. And then I ended up going to jail for it, and in jail, I had a massive awakening. So it was like, I wasn't there for very long, but when I was in there and I walked into the space, I could clearly see this woman, who was leaned up against the wall, the jail cell wall there, and she had, holes down her arms, and she's collapsed, and I could just see her whole entire life blueprint that led her to this point. I don't know how I can explain that any better, but I could see the voids in her life that had caused her to be emotionally trying to numb her emotional pain through drugs and everything. And then I looked to the other side and there was this little girl. She had to be barely 18 like I was. And she had a tattoo of a man's name on her forehead and she was very barely dressed. And I saw that she had no father growing up and that she was in the prostitution industry, and that was her pimp's name. So I saw people's blueprints of the past that are like outlines. And so from there, I the expansion just continued from that because I never was able to look at a person or judge them. I really wasn't a big judger anyways, but I just was able to see a deeper sense of the spirit within people and the journey. So that was a big awakening when I was about 18. I never shoplifted again though.
I'm sure that serves you with your clients for sure. So
Oh yeah,
tell me about a client, and obviously no names, but a client or an
sure.
experience you've had where you see people that have had an event in their life where all of a sudden it almost as if their eyes were closed, shut, and all of a sudden their eyes have opened to the spiritual world and all that is. Can you give us an example of that or what that looks like for most people?
Yeah, it's different for everybody, but for those who kind of go through a sudden awakening where it's not a natural kind of shedding the layers of the illusion of our separateness, a lot of times it comes through, well, COVID was a huge catalyst for people to wake up. Let's just talk about COVID because people were actually, forced to kind of be still and not be on that rat race of making money, paying bills, and, being in a job that they really didn't want to. So I actually had an influx of a lot of people who were severely depressed and didn't realize it because they were just going, 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 going. And when they had that time to really kind of reflect, they started to realize that um, there's something more for them, that they're not really in alignment to what their purpose is. And so a lot of people really started seeking with that. Um, a lot of times through that's just this one scenario, and it can be very destructive, because especially religious trauma. I work with a lot of people with religious trauma. Now, there's beauty in religion, and there's beauty in anything, and all paths lead to the same place. But sometimes churches or religions will create fear-based belief systems in people, and it's quite traumatizing. So I work with a lot of people, and then what happens is they start to question the whole basis of their reality, the complex structure of their belief systems. And once you start to like peek beyond that, and you see that that's not the only reality, it can be really frightening and overwhelming. And people, it's that it's kind of like everything you've ever been told is a lie. And so you go through lots of stages, almost like grief, actually. Not exactly like grief, but it's everything you ever told was a lie. Then you have the anger phase, many phases in between. But at that point, that's when people start to say, okay, let me assess my belief systems. And then that's a whole nother journey of basically just shedding the veils over our consciousness. And then it gets very exciting. And then so you have like the very lows, and then you go through isolation. Nobody understands you. Nobody can. That's a big one for people, is nobody feels like they're understood. They can't talk about woo woo when it's actually physics and very, very real. So that isolation phase is very hard for people. So that's why I do a lot of community events, so that people have a place to be safe and meet people. And then the exciting part, where a lot of people, I always, they go down the rabbit hole, they start consuming way too much information, and then their mind kind of can't really, our minds can only process so much information. And a lot of the spiritual growth really has to be experienced. It has to be embodied. It has to be felt. It can't just be taught, kind of thing. So a lot of people get that burnout of over consuming. So I always tell people, just take it slow, because it gets exciting too. There's an excitement phase. Um, so I don't know if I really answered your question, but kind of, it's so many facets to it that,
You
yeah,
did. And I find that interesting because when I first started, after Josh passed away, the first question I had is, where did he go? He can't be gone. Where did like his
yeah,
essence go? Where did his soul go? Because for me, my belief being in religion was that he went to heaven. And I could not process the concept that I would never have a relationship with him again, never talk to him again. I'd never see him again until I was in heaven. And then my questions around that were, okay, so when we go to heaven, like, is he still my son and am I still his mom? Or like, is my grandma still my grandma? Or is she a child? Like, I had all those questions, right? So when he passed away, I remember thinking, he's not gone, he's not stuck in heaven. And I started developing this relationship with him where he started coming to me at night. And then it led to the getting on some sessions where a woman was channeling the archangels. And at one point, we were able to ask the archangels questions. At one point, one of my questions was, how do I be more spiritual? What do I need to do to be more spiritual? And the answer I got was, there's no such thing as more spiritual. You are spiritual. And the more you desire it, you need it, you seek it, the less we're going to give to you. Because what's going to happen is if we give you this flood of being psychic or being, spiritual, it's going to be way more than you can handle. So at this
hmm,
point, just like you were saying, is just allow and trust and surrender and let it come to you and just be in the space of openness.
yeah, absolutely. That's it right there. Surrender, allowance, and presence. And that's really hard for a lot of people because the mind is so busy. But that's it. That's the space to be in because silence really does speak loudly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So I
that's,
heard you talking about those first couple stages of the awakening.
uh-huh.
And where are you? Where are you in your spiritual journey and what you share with others or what you offer?
Well, I'm obviously human, but I really, I feel completely at peace with death and the state of consciousness I'm in. I feel, a lot of people, are going through that, the third, I don't know if you know about the third dimension to the fifth dimension, but it's just like states of consciousness where we're able to embody more light. So I go through, I feel like I bounce back and forth from third dimension to fifth dimension, but I'm very self-aware and I have the ability to catch myself, if I'm leaning into a direction that isn't in alignment. And I really got to test that strength when I went through a flood in 2016 and then also when my mom died of cancer a couple of years ago. So I got to practice being emotionally uh like practicing emotional intelligence, if you will, in those extremely hard things to go through. So um, there's always more to learn and grow and expand. But at this point, I'm just at peace. I feel very blessed with the people that find me, and I'm a match for them, and vice versa.
Yeah. So do you
But
have a
always more to
relationship?
learn.
There is. Do you have a relationship with your mom? Does she come to you? Does she give you messages? Tell us about that.
Oh yes, yeah. Actually, I have a really great connection with her. She actually came through a QHHT session. I was like, "Mom, you can't do that." But my client, she's a medium too, so she's open to that. But yeah, she pops in and she's very much around and um yeah, so she comes to me in different ways. When she this was really a beautiful blessing that just so when she was dying of lung cancer, it was the day she was passing, it was the end. And I was like kind of praying for mercy. I was asking, the angels to just lift her. And about 2 minutes later, in walks the nurse, and he goes, "We're going to move you to room 222 at the Mayo Clinic in the Mayo Clinic." And that's my number. Like, we all get the numbers, but that is just one of my numbers. And so that was it gave me so much peace, even as I was watching her slip away. So I have a really good connection with her in spirit, and I feel her with my daughter a lot. My daughter feels her a lot too.
Yeah.
So we're just all connected. She's just in a little bit of a different dimension.
Yes. So those that are watching, because I get this question often, how does she communicate with you? Do you have a knowing? Do you have, oh, she's here with me? Is it an energetic thing? Do you hear her? Do you see her? How does your mom communicate with you?
Usually she'll pop a random memory will come to my mind and and then it takes me to her energy. So my clair is like clair knowing. I don't know necessarily have specific techniques, but it's usually a flash of a memory that will kind of invoke an emotion. And when we have that emotion, it kind of opens our field up a little bit to receive, information. And but it's interesting. She wasn't huge into understanding the quantum, field or the work that I do ultimately. But on the other side, she's definitely come through and she says, "I understand everything now that you were saying."
Yeah.
And something really was cool is I did gong therapy, like a gong, an instrument, and I was working with doctors over at the Mayo Clinic to try to get this in as a modality for palliative care when people are passing. So anyways, there's this amazing study where a person will they'll take blood before and after a gong bath. So they'll draw someone's blood, look at the red blood cells. And before the gong bath, the blood cells are really sticky and kind of coagulated and they're flowing, but they're not really free flowing. And then 30 minutes into a gong bath, they take the blood sample and everything is in harmony, everything is flowing. And so my mom, I used to do gong therapy just to help lift her pain and raise her vibration so she could eat and things like that. And she actually came through and said, that really is a powerful tool that we'll be using in the future, which we already know, sound is the future of medicine.
I love
So
that.
it's just like really amazing things like that, like confirmations that you just can't make up, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you say gong bath, so for those that are listening, gong bath is like a sound bath, and it's
Yes.
the music, the sounds of the gong that are bathing you in the sound and the energy, correct?
Yeah, it's the pure vibrations and what we're like, we're harmonic beings. And so what it does is it helps to like basically crash out, if you will, and allow your body to catch a new harmonic rhythm. It's extremely powerful. It's been used for eons and ages, and it's pretty profound. It'll silence the mind, even for our really logical. overthinkers, it will silence the mind, and the subconscious mind comes forward.
Mm,
So it's a
mm.
that's why I love sound. It's just a really amazing tool.
Yeah, it's like the sound bowls. Yeah, I love that. So do you
Hmm.
feel, are you a type of medium where you feel other souls and you get messages from others, or is it mostly just your personal connection?
Well, I can do that, and so I in this lifetime, in this where I'm at in my life, I know that my purpose is to not give people readings or to do that work. It's to help people to connect to their own alignment, and to not go outside of themselves for the answers. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just the person that's always going to lead you back to yourself, to go back within and strengthen that intuition for yourself, so you have it, so that we're not always relying on outside sources to get our answers.
I love that. So you almost teach people, or you do teach people also how to quiet their mind and listen and trust the messages they're getting so they can do it for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. So I have a pretty powerful process I've developed over the course that is a lot of success. And I'll just share it with you because anybody listening, especially if they're in our field, I have seen great success as I take them on a journey of an energetic purification, helping them to connect with the source within their heart, whatever their belief system is, and really do a deep cleansing. And of course, there's an educational process before we take somebody into these sessions. Like the initial session is like educating them about the light body and consciousness and things. So the first phase, especially when somebody's had like a lot of trauma or they're in that anxiety loop, and everybody, it's almost like anxiety is a trend word.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really it's your spirit wanting you to feel something and wanting you to process something. We just keep shoving it down. It just makes it worse. So the first phase is a spiritual cleansing, very deep, very powerful. And then the second one is a deep cleansing of the subconscious mind. And then the inner child, as we all know, is very important because we will never feel safe enough to expand our consciousness until that part of us is integrated. And then we can start to advance on the ascension side of things. But I find when you clear out those core and forgiveness, let's not forget that. That's the fourth, that's the big one. Because at that point, you vibrationally transcend, you stop dragging it with you, and then you start to vibrate at a different frequency. And you actually will see new relationships coming. And so that's the core four for me. And then from there, people advance relatively quickly.
I love that. Yes. So you do that. That's the process that you use with many of your clients when they come to you saying, I have anxiety. You use this process to help them tap into themselves, tap into their higher selves, and then open up.
Yeah, and not everybody is a fit for the spiritual path because belief systems will block it, but eventually they end up attuning to it naturally. So sometimes I'll go the clinical route and help them address, but then the idea is to show them through their or subconscious what the anxiety is trying to tell them. And that's very enlightening for people because we just unconsciously go, go, go. We don't, you know, sit with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So, who would you say has been your greatest source of inspiration or support during your journey through everything that you've been through and where you are now?
My greatest source of inspiration.
Hmm.
Well, I would have to say definitely Jesus. I know that's probably like the easiest thing to say, but he is like literally um, where I feel at home and connected. Now, if we're talking about humans that are on the planet now, who've inspired me, I would say definitely Bruce Lipton. I love him. I love the science and the spirituality, the harmony, when people will bring those together because it helps the left brain, the right brain come into a balanced state without resisting one or the other. And I see people really excel fast. So Bruce Lipton and of course Joe Dispenza's great. Um, and honestly, my clients are so inspirational to me because I learned so much from them.
Yes,
So yeah.
absolutely. We do. I want to come back to Jesus being your source of inspiration and your relationship with him. But before that, you're aligning with the divine book. Because I know you for who you are, I can imagine if anyone is looking at the whole science and spirituality piece, there is a blend in your book.
Oh yeah, I definitely blend scripture with with the, the metaphysics or the physics science. And throughout the process, I'll just share this kind of funny about Jesus. I was writing this book that came through me. I never thought I'd write a book in a million years, but it came through me, and it was just random, like not channeling, but I was just writing this really profound things that I wish I had access to when I was young. And so I was like, I don't want to go knocking. I'm talking to Jesus out loud in my house, and I'm like, well, I don't want to go knocking on people's doors like Jehovah Witnesses. I'm just being honest.
Yep.
And and literally 2 minutes later, two boys on bikes showed up at my house with the Jehovah Witness pamphlet. And so my download was don't question how the word gets out. So that was pretty funny because it was so fast and so instant. And then I wrote that book, and I during a flood, and so um, I was called. I believe I wrote it at that timeline so that I would have to actually practice every single thing I wrote in real time through a complete devastation. So yeah, and I asked, all the time. I didn't want to mislead people ever, or anything. So I feel really good about where that book's at, and definitely his inspiration and guidance through it was pretty incredible.
So when you talk about practicing everything you went through as you wrote the book, what I'm understanding is you were going through a really tough time and you got to practice being spiritual and walking with Jesus and being like Jesus in order to move through everything that was difficult at the time.
Yeah, it was complete devastation. It was like a 5-foot river that came through with everything, every physical, materialistic thing we own, cars, clothes, everything gone, house destroyed. And we didn't have insurance because it was a non-flood zone that we purchased in specifically. So we just didn't have that in our insurance policy. So it was a complete loss.
Mm.
And it was very hot and miserable. But yeah, so I was able to practice everything. This is a pretty interesting story about manifestation. One of my neighbors came over and she's like, our houses are gutted. We're like homeless. There's, no running water. It was a bad situation. And she comes over and she's like, I've been everywhere. Nobody in town's going to get counters or cabinets, excuse me, for like 6 months, 6 to 8 months. And I'm like, oh no, I need to get my life. Like you need your counters just to get your kitchen so you can kind of start, getting things put together. And I just said, I'm like, no, I'm not going to accept that. And I went to Home Depot for the 15,000th time I've been. And I pull up, and as soon as I pull up, there's a guy putting a sign out that says pop up cabinet shop from New Orleans that just opened. So I went right over there and I got my cabinets within 2 weeks. So it's like, yeah, it's being amongst, especially poverty consciousness too. A lot of people were expecting a lot of handouts, and we're in need. So, but I could see so clearly the people who were focused on what they did have were calling in more blessings, and those who focused on the lack were calling in more lack. Very clear to see that and witness it. So that was pretty profound for me to have the observation of.
Yeah, that's one of those laws of the universe is, and I teach all of my clients that also when I'm working with them is whatever you're saying, whatever you're fearing, whatever you're calling in. And whether it's abundance and love and blessings and you're focused on it, that's what you're calling in. And it's an interesting concept that many people are not aware of. And I wasn't aware of it until I really opened up to more of the spiritual world. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely were not taught these things. Natural laws are not taught in schools, emotional intelligence, self-love, conscious farming, all of that. And when you have those fundamental, you know, tools of awareness, we already know it. It's just we've in a state of forgetfulness. It's so enlightening, so empowering, and people really you got to start to really take responsibility for yourself. And not everybody's ready for that, but when you are, it's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. All right. Well, before we wrap it up, I had mentioned a little earlier about your relationship with Jesus. And the reason I'm curious about it, I'd love to hear a little bit more, is when Josh died, I spent many, many hours. I remember, and I could even tell you where I was standing in my house, saying and begging Jesus to carry me. And I remember saying, I cannot do this on my own. Will you please carry me? And ironically, coincidentally, at his celebration of life, we read the footprint poem where the guy asks, why there's only one set of footprints in the sand in the hardest times of his life. And Jesus said, well, it's because I'm carrying you. And I all many, many times had said, please carry me. I'm not strong enough. I am too weak to do this without me. And then as my relationship developed with Jesus, even after the spiritual awakening to me, so I would have thought, being a Christian, going to church, I had a strong relationship with Jesus. And after my awakening, I feel like my relationship with Jesus became more personal and much stronger. And now I feel him on my right hand side. So I know where he is. And when I call
Mhm.
him, he's there and he's like my friend and he's there for me all the time. So I'm curious about where do you feel and where does he hang out? Where is he in your life? How does
Um, it's probably in my heart frequency area, in my chest. It's just a presence of complete compassion. It's hard to explain. But I do deliverance with certain people. What I mean by deliverance is clearing lower level energies, parasitic entities sometimes that can get when we're doing a lot of drugs or we have a lot of trauma, it kind of weakens us in ways, and we do live in a universe that like attracts like. So your vibrations attracting certain lower level energies. That I've also had an experience where I was shown in spirit how that looks. So what's so beautiful is to see his work with like my it's not me, I'm just facilitating it, but through those cleansings, I Jesus is that's why I always make sure the clients and belief system with Jesus's energy. But if you're carrying lower level entities that are like parasitic to the mind, they try to create a lot of havoc because they feed on it and stuff like that. Deliverance is done in the minute when you use his name. If the person is truly seeking it, it is just given. It is just like that. And it's not, it's just like a force field of love. It's just such a high vibration, it just casts everything off, is the best way I can try to put it. And I love to be a part of just holding that space because it's so powerful.
that is beautiful. And I want to repeat that is it we are healed, we are forgiven just by using his name.
Yes. I mean, yeah, and so a lot of the religious people who've been hurt, it goes directly against the teachings of Christ. Do unto others as you'd want to, do not judge. The most simple core things have been like twisted. I would recommend your listeners to listen to the Gospel of Thomas. It was a book that was found in Egypt, or I believe it was 1950s. Don't quote me on the time, but it was found in the desert, hidden. And it is when you read that and listen to that, that's the Jesus I know. It's one of the most enlightening books there is. And it was, taken out to keep us in an oppressed, separate state, which served us, but we're collectively evolving right now. So it's a powerful book, and you can listen to it on YouTube. So
And what is the name of it again?
of the Gospel of Thomas.
The gospel.
And before anybody listens to it, I just recommend that you open your heart and just ask Jesus to give you the eyes and the ears to see and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've learned is that if it's not of God or not of Jesus, you'll know when you listen.
You'll
When you
know.
listen, you
Hmm.
listen to your heart, you listen to what it is your heart is saying, and you ask for that um acknowledgement or peace, you'll know. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of our clients, they're carrying a lot of lower vibrational emotions and stuff. So as we help them kind of clear that out, then that's easier for them to tap into that essence without so much resistance. So that's why I love what we do, is working with the subconscious mind too.
Well, this has been such an enlightening conversation. I so appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And if anyone would
Yes.
like to get a hold of you or has questions for you, can you tell us how? And we'll put it in the comments below also in the YouTube, but how others can get a hold of you or find you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to my website, chantellrenee.org. I have a Facebook page at Chantell Renee where I share just, inspiring content, all the time. I have a private group for local events. So just probably go to my website or my Facebook, and I'd be happy to connect with you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
Thanks for watching. We hope you loved it.
And if you did, please like this video and subscribe to the channel.
And remember, always connect to your truest essence.
And choose love. We'll see you next time.